Good morning. We have met with the compliance with the Open Meeting Act and the filing of the meeting notice and the posting of the agenda. I call the meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Chairman Conway,
Here?
Vice Chair Potter,
Here.
Commissioner Amos,
Here.
Commissioner Putnam,
Here.
Commissioner Hunter,
Here.
Commissioner Ray,
Here.
Commissioner Ritz.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We need a motion for the approval of the meeting of the Aeronautics Commission minutes, January 11th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
We have a motion. Second?
Second.
We have a second. Commissioner Ray? Any questions? Please call the roll.
Vice Chair Potter,
Aye.
Commissioner Amos.
Aye.
Commissioner Putnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Commissioner Ray,
Aye.
Chairman Conway.
Aye. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, Director's Report. Director Byrd.
Mr. Chairman, pardon me, but we're actually going to let, if we could, Ms. Shelton, we're going to move her items up since she's got to kind of oversee our art awards contest, et cetera. She's going to be brief, and then I'll get on with my report.
Very good.
Good morning, Commissioners. We had a great year for the Aviation Art Contest. We had 1,300 entries, and I just wanted to tell the Commission how important the team was to the Aviation Art Contest success. We, Catherine Tabor, Jen Bishop, and Rhonda Mullins, and Michelle all helped with the Aviation Art Contest, and I just want to really thank them for that. So we had 1,300 entries, 81 schools across the state sent entries, and we had 6 celebrity judges this year. A colonel from the Army, from the Air Guard, and then a chief from the Army National Guard. And then we had representation from Northrop Grumman, from Atlantic Aviation, from Lawton Fort Sill Regional Airport. And then we had one more, and I can't think of who that is. But in the back of your packets, you will see the Aviation Art Contest program, which was printed here at ODOT, and we thank ODOT for that as well. Thank you, Secretary Patterson, for that. If you have any questions about the art contest today, it's at 1:30. I'd be happy to answer those for you, and I hope that you all will attend if you are able to do that. One of the things that we added this year is we added a HUA Award, which is the Heart of Oklahoma Aviation Honor, and it is for an entry from a student with a disability. And so we are starting that, and they are being honored today as well. And his name is Trevor Rooney. He is from Cimarron Middle School. Commissioner Putnam, I think that is your area over there. And he's a wonderful person and a wonderful artist, and we were happy to do that. He painted the entire painting with his mouth, and so if you look in the program, it is there. Aviation and Aerospace Day at the Capitol is going to be April 24th. This year we have reserved the entire Capitol, and we plan to have a luncheon. We would love for you guys to come, all of you, and we have about 30 exhibitors already registered, and we look to have about 65 exhibitors this year. Aviation and Aerospace Events Report is in your packet. There is a lot going on, so that is self-explanatory. I'd yield for questions.
Wow, how many entries did we have last year?
Last year, we had 1,117 entries.
So pretty good increase.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we had a nice increase, and I think that the contest is becoming more popular.
Are we getting better representation through the state now?
Yes, I think that the calendars that ODOT helps us print as well, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that. I think that really increases not only the Aeronautics Commission's visibility, but it also increases the contest's awareness for teachers.
Very good.
So,
Thanks. Any questions for Sandra?
thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. All right, now we'll go to Director's Report. Item 4, Victor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. The governor in January 26th made an announcement about Kratos Aerospace and Defense Firm. It's a leading provider of national security solutions. They're opening up some administrative engineering offices and production facilities for their jet-powered unmanned aircraft systems. So really excited about that. I think the thing I was the most pleased about at the press conference was the governor said Oklahoma was one of the premier destinations for the aerospace and defense industry. And then she quoted somewhat significantly from our economic impact study, so that made me real happy. February 20th, Boeing hosted a NASA roadshow, which showed General Tom Stafford was a prominent piece of that. He's, of course, made his mark in space history, but talked about what's on the horizon, what's to come. It was a legislative reception as well. I got to visit at some length with Pro Tem Schultz. I enjoyed that, and it was really an excellent show. It was most interesting. Last week I was in Washington, D.C. Secretary Patterson was there as well. We have our Washington briefing at the same time as the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. I got to actually, I was visiting with Secretary Patterson, and lo and behold, Chairman Schuster walked up, and I thanked him for moving forward with FAA reauthorization, and I kept it short and sweet and didn't get into the details with respect to ATC privatization. But I also had visited with all of our delegation, actually saw Congressman Russell and Congressman Cole. Congressman Russell actually came and spoke at the NASAO Washington briefing. He was a leader on the ATC privatization fight. But I have also, on the left side of your packet, is the position paper, if you will, of NASAO on the most important and high-profile issues facing Congress in Washington today. So thought you might want to see that. Really would like it if you would review, and good for you to have. Recently, we were asked by the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Select Agencies, which is the subcommittee that oversees non-appropriated agencies, such as ourselves. And we were asked to compile a report and then visit with our senator assigned to come and essentially interview us and talk to us with Senator Rosino, who you will see him again later today. He was one of our judges for the Aviation Art Contest, but enjoyed really doing that. We don't really get a chance that often. We've actually had two this session and actually a couple others, but we were able to also make a presentation to Senate Transportation about OAC and what OAC does. But that was actually an opportunity for us to inform, and I think we took a very good swipe at that in our report that we submitted to the Appropriations Subcommittee. February 13th, we did the presentation regarding the Senate Transportation Committee, and that went very well, and that was just leading up to some things I'm going to talk about in the legislative and congressional report a few items down. That would conclude my report, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Good morning, Commissioner Ritz. Glad to have you.
Okay. I don't see any questions, Director Byrd.
Okay. We have a new intern, Joe Seagraves, and actually I did not realize Joe wasn't going to be here, but he's in class, so I'm sure you all are happy about that. But Grayson, do you want to tell us a little bit about Joe?
Sure. Well, the first thing you'll notice about Joe is he should be playing for the Thunder basketball team. No.
Yeah, we're going to lose him tonight.
Yeah, we're going to lose him tonight. He is a tall young man at the OU Aviation program. He is a non-flying major, actually gave flying a shot, but found himself to be a little too tall for the Piper Warrior aircraft, and he is very tall. But no, he has desires to get into aviation in a non-flying role, whether that's working for FAA, working for state aviation government, whether working for a local airport, Tinker Air Force Base. He does want to stay here in Oklahoma, so that's a great thing. Hopefully we can hang on to him and find him a job right here in Oklahoma in some capacity within aviation. But that's his passion. He wants to do, and you don't find that too often in aviation. Most people want to be pilots or air traffic controllers, but we think we found somebody that really wants to be in a non-flying aviation type job, and that's something for him to be proud of. You'll meet him this afternoon if you're going to be at the art contest. He has class till about noon or 1 o'clock on Thursday, but he'll be here for the award ceremony. So with that being said, please introduce yourself to him if you're coming this afternoon. And if you have any leads for him or suggestions, ideas, ways he can further his career, please share that information with him.
Great. Thank you. Looking forward to meeting him. Director Byrd, legislative and regulatory update.
And I'll try to be brief. There's a lot of area to cover here, but then I would certainly entertain any questions you all may have with respect to the various pieces of legislation and issues. As you do know, that we have two of our own initiatives that are still pending from last session. One of those has to do with the excise tax charter exemption. That's been one of our 18 exemptions on the books for some time here in the state to the aircraft excise tax. There's 26 states that provide for such an exemption. We are the only state that absolutely has no requirement insofar as that aircraft that is actually put on a charter ticket actually having to be used for charter operations. All the other states have some requirement. The minimum is 50% in all those states. Kentucky requires exclusive use in order to garner that particular exemption. We're trying to move to the 50%. That piece of legislation's way down the flight path, if you will. We ran into some problem last session with some opposition from some of our Part 135 operators. And so Representative Eccles, the floor leader, held that up. But currently, we're kind of waiting that Representative Wright, who was our House author on that, is trying to arrange a meeting for myself, himself, and Secretary Patterson to meet with Representative Eccles. And I really appreciate, you notice I said Secretary Patterson, yes, he wants to go with us to try to, that is an inequitable situation. And I find it most interesting that just recently it was called to my attention by an Oklahoma Part 135 operator that, gee, it sure would be nice in Oklahoma if we were pro-business like they are in Colorado, because they're entertaining a piece of legislation up there to do the same thing. They're one of the 24 states that don't provide for this exemption. And it's interesting. I think pretty clearly my friend has not maybe looked at that legislation, because when he was apprised me of this by an email, right sitting across from me was my peer in Colorado. So I asked him about the legislation, and he sent it to me. Well, isn't it interesting that when you actually read legislation, so Colorado is going to require, just like Kentucky, that in order for an aircraft owner to get this exemption, has to be exclusively used for charter, exclusively. And if the owner wants to use the aircraft, they have to charter it at market rate. So those are two of the conditions. So I think that I may ask this gentleman, well, if you're happy with what the Colorado legislation does, I'm happy to do that. You're getting a much better deal right now, and you've been getting it for a long time. Probably a deal that none of the other 26 states are offering. So, interesting. Senate Bill 705 is about raising the cap on that was implemented in 2015 on our aircraft excise tax, which is our largest source of revenue, about 92% of our revenues. That was put in at $4.5 million. At that point in time, we were below $4 million. But last year, for example, we made a $1.2 million contribution to the general revenue fund. This year, we will probably exceed that $4.5 million cap again. We know the story here. This is coming from aircraft owners and pilots, those who use our Oklahoma airport system. I certainly think there's an implied contract understanding at the very least that money, I know Secretary Patterson can relate to this, that money is going to go into aviation infrastructure. And we're proud of the fact that 83% of that money does go into aviation infrastructure. But we think that all of that money ought to be going to aviation infrastructure. So we're going to, it's still a difficult time, but we're going to try to see if we can get that raised to $6 million this legislative session. Legislation relating to the commission, there were two bills. They're really partner bills, if you will. One is authorizing legislation creating and Aerospace Commerce Economic Services Act, ACES. These pieces of legislation, in short, would replace CADSCU, the Center for Aerospace and Defense Supplier Quality, which is a program still under Aeronautics. We had funded that on our own the last 8 years without any partners, without any appropriated dollars, as was promised when it was transferred to us from OCAST in 2008. We know then that the state kind of hit some hard times, but last year, the commission decided last March not to fund CADSCU any longer, and I certainly understand and respect that. That led to this action. Those bills have actually, they are moving along in the process. The word is they're going to face some steep challenge because of budget constraints, and there's been a requested $1 million to operate that program that would be created within the Department of Commerce under those two pieces of legislation. Now, two bills that were, and there were actually three, but two bills that would have consolidated the Aeronautics Commission into the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. This isn't the first time we've heard about this since we, just an interesting little bit of history. We were an agency with you all, with a director of aeronautics, within ODOT between 1976 and 2002. Prior to that time, we had existed independently from 1963 to 1976. We were originally created in 1946, actually before the Civil Aeronautics Administration and Board, as the Oklahoma Aviation Commission. We went out of existence in 1953 because of lack of funding. In '63, Governor Henry Bellman felt, gee, this aviation thing's going to be kind of important. I can see that. We've got the American Airlines Maintenance Base that we took from LaGuardia. We have this thing called Tinker Air Force Base, and we have this other thing, the Civil Aeronautics Standardization Center, that we had also gotten from Houston about the same time we got that AA maintenance base. He wanted a state agency that was going to be certainly looking out for the state's interest in this rapidly expanding field and industry post-World War II, and that was the Aeronautics Commission. But we totally spun out and were separate and independent in 2002, the first year I came to Aeronautics, and that's the way we have existed since then. This was a difficult one because Secretary Patterson and I talked at some length, and I must say these kind of things definitely cause angst among your staff. And Secretary Patterson came over and visited with the staff, which I greatly appreciate, and that allayed most of that angst, and I do sincerely appreciate that. But the problem is, why I wish that Secretary Patterson was in perpetuity and could be secretary forever. He may not, but that's what I wish. That won't be the case. And we have been able to do some things that I fear would be very difficult. Being involved in trying to protect military training airspace. I know that this gentleman over here is certainly behind us in that regard. I'm not sure that would always be the case. The engineer tax credits for aerospace, which has contributed in a very significant way to Boeing bringing 2,500 engineers here. I know his predecessor, once or twice removed, wasn't exactly crazy about that. And that did certainly we have to report up legislative initiatives we want to do. But the economic impact of the engineers that have been hired far outweighs the really it's a slight cost of has averaged about $3 million a year. The economic impact now of the engineers that have been hired in aerospace since that bill became effective in 2008 is almost $1 billion. That is a pretty good trade-off. You can't sell these credits. These aren't the Great Plains rocket plane tax credits, which this entity did not recommend to the legislature and would not have. They didn't ask us about those. But those are some examples that I think it kind of makes some sense in a state where aviation and aerospace is the second largest industry that we are separate. That's my position, and I do want to say also that puts Secretary Patterson had a good way to address this, as director, he kind of thought things were, you know, as secretary, this sounds like a fairly good idea in terms of government efficiency and so forth. So I appreciated his two-hat approach. But those bills have, in fact, only one bill even came before committee actually, and it did not move forward. Another senator and representative who had bills, after meeting with us, did not move their bills forward on their own cognizance. Congress, I was there last week. I'm sure you all might have heard a couple of announcements. Air traffic control privatization, at least for this round of FAA reauthorization, is, I think, been put to rest. And we can say that that one is going to be dead, but it does tend to be a little bit like Dracula. Unless you put a stake through its heart, it tends to come back. It's been around since the late 1980s. I think it's come up in every presidential administration. I have no doubt it will probably come back, but for the time being, it's gone. We get to move forward with trying to get an FAA reauthorization bill. Everything I'm seeing says probably August before that will happen. That's unfortunate. It makes planning hard. It makes construction hard, because we never can get enough authorization and enough funding to go together to actually get out airport grants from the FAA. And that affects us. That happened to us in 2014 when we had money setting aside, but we were waiting for federal money too, which we do a lot of, not just when we help a local community with their match, but when we're going to put in additional money, if the FAA dollars aren't there, the project can't start. And that had happened in 2013 and 2014, and as a result, we had X number of dollars sitting there. $3 million were taken from our revolving fund, and that was certainly impacted by that situation. But the good news is, moving forward, I think that Senator Thune, who's chair of the Senate Commerce Committee, he does want to bring some relief to the pilot shortage issue, and some of that has certainly been exacerbated by the 1,500-hour requirement in order to get your commercial certification, if you will. He wants to bring some relief to that. I think he will probably be successful in that. It's not anywhere near the impediment that ATC privatization was. The Trump infrastructure proposal, and Secretary Patterson may want to, if any of you read your papers, our governor and Secretary Patterson wrote an op-ed, and it's good news anytime that additional money is going to be put into infrastructure in our country. There are things that need desperate attention, and many of those things are airports. I think, to quote our president, some of our airports, and I think he's thinking of his favorite airport, LaGuardia. I'm sure I'll get a call or comment from New York, but they're like third world airports. Yes, we are lagging. So any investment is good. I think that, we've yet to see the details all come out about this. We know that it involves $200 billion in additional federal funds, and up to, I think, 1.3 billion would come from private, state, and local, to get to a total of like 1.5 trillion. And that's all good. That proposition, this is really, as I understand it, more like it's not going to affect the existing programs, Federal Highway Program, Federal Aviation Airport Improvement Program. Those will still be in place at the same ratios and percentages. This new money would be more like a 20-80 proposition, federal 20, and hopefully you'd get that 80%. I think in the air, I'm being frank here and candid, but I think in the airport aviation world, that could be pretty difficult. I think you're really talking about the biggest hub airports that would be able to take advantage of that. I think it certainly could pose some challenge on the surface side, but if our state, things continue to improve, I think we could even, perhaps, I'd let Secretary Patterson address that, but we could perhaps capture some of those new federal dollars. But that's my take insofar as its impact. General aviation, I just don't think we're going to be able to access any of that additional federal money. I think it will be hard. You all know we average $5 million a year the local communities, I don't see us being able to come up with the 80% match to try to garner some of those funds. Any questions about that? Secretary Patterson, would you like to make a comment? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you're pretty well versed on this, probably much better than me.
You did well.
Okay, I appreciate it. Protecting military training airspace. I think the commissioner that's probably most focused on this is our own Commissioner Putnam. It seems like he has some personal relation to this, and it's kind of close to his heart. I'm concerned. I'll put it that way. If you all will recall, why we became involved in this and why there was the effort last legislative session was the federal scheme, which this DOD siting clearinghouse that had been created in the National Defense Authorization Act in 2011 wasn't working. I've shown you the map before of the military training routes assigned to Vance, and you could see how existing wind turbines under construction, and turbines proposed were severely degrading parts of these routes to the point that some of them could no longer be used, where those were and were being constructed. That was the proposition. Federal scheme's not working. We need to do something stateside. Indeed, the gentleman who runs the DOD clearinghouse now said, you states are the backstop. These are your assets too. We would recommend that you do something. So that's what we were trying to do. Where the state, the simple proposition was we were going to extend the jurisdiction of the Aeronautics Commission under the Aircraft Pilot and Passenger Protection Act to protect this military training airspace. In addition to public airports, which includes the military airports, but just the airport proper, into these training routes, drop zones, and traffic patterns. That ran into a, no pun intended, a significant headwind at the end of session last year. So what has evolved this session is a proposal, a process at the state level. Regulatory may be a little bit that could be too strong, where actually it's going to completely default and depend upon the federal system. And then that, if there is a finding of no hazard to these areas that we have talked about by the FAA, then that would be filed with the Corporation Commission. And the proposed wind development or additional expansion of that could proceed. So no state agency would be exercising any regulatory authority, actually. You would have a filing repository, and that would be the Corporation Commission. Concerned, but politics is the art of compromise. You don't always get what you want, but you try to get the best thing you can get. I think it can work. And we're working with Representative Ortega and Senator Schultz and Senator Pugh to try to make it as strong as we can. But apparently this is really where we're settling is really all that we can get right now. That's what we can get. Not the best, but it can work. And we're going to try to do everything we can do to make it work. Both Senator Inhofe and Congressman Russell have worked very hard to ensure that the base commanders are heard, because that's what was happening under the Obama administration and how it had been implemented and interpreted. That local base commander was really being closed out. If that base commander said that we cannot fulfill our mission anymore to train young pilots to be the pilots we need to defend America across the globe, well, we have renewable energy. So that has definitely been tweaked and changed. So hopefully that local commander will be heard in the process. Originally, that was in the state proposal too this session, and that has kind of been watered down a little bit, but there is still the federal process. My biggest concern probably is a federal process that's really not been implemented yet. The NDAA, just National Defense Authorization Act, the new one, just got passed back in the late summer. The regs haven't even been written to implement the law. And one problem we were continually seeing as we got into and understanding what happens at the federal level is you got the FAA obstruction and evaluation guys that are getting these Form 7460s. We want to put this up in the sky. And they're going, well, we got, a lot of those are ex-military, Commissioner, and they like to, here's the rules. And, well, here's the 8 reasons we can say something's a hazard to air navigation. There's nothing about military on here. And I've screamed that from the mountaintop. You got to make sure FAA and DOD are talking to one another. So we'll see, but that's probably my biggest concern, that we're going to rely upon this federal system that we said was broken, and that's why we were doing something. It has hopefully been changed for the better, but it isn't tried and true yet. So I'd stand for questions. Commissioners?
Any questions for Vic?
Do I understand then that they're trying to get the FAA to administer blocking of the low-level routes, but that's not in any kind of written form yet?
If the proposal at the state level now becomes law, it will totally rely upon the federal process to protect our military training airspace. There will be no independent type of zoning authority being administered here to achieve that purpose of protecting military training airspace.
But the FAA has no process to protect military routes now.
Well,
Understand it?
I would argue they did after the 2011 NDAA. But when you hear from the guys who are actually doing it, but now it has been both what Senator Inhofe and Congressman Russell did. Hopefully will translate to, well, yes, FAA, you're supposed to protect military training airspace and the ability of that particular installation to fulfill its mission. For example, Vance and Altus, its mission of training. But we don't know yet. You see, it's not up, we don't know. We don't know what is going to come out of that oven. We don't know. We know what the intent was of Inhofe and Russell. We know. But that's probably my biggest concern. But we're working with, this is apparently what the market will bear right now, and we're trying to help them make it as good as we can.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Director Byrd.
Okay,
We're up to
that's-
financials, it looks like.
Yep.
Jane, tell us the good news.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, Secretary Patterson. In your packet behind item number 10, you'll find the financial information, and the date I used was January 31st, mostly because I didn't have the final numbers for February until today, so they couldn't put in the report. So these are all numbers as of January 31st. On the first page, it shows the commission had an ending cash balance of $6.2 million with encumbrances totaling just under $4.5 million, leaving an unencumbered cash balance of $1,727,798. As you can see on the chart, the expected revenues for the remainder of FY18 total just over $3.1 million, with expenditures in our capital improvement program expected to be $3.8 million. But that's only if every project we have gets completed, which that doesn't happen that way. So we're not going to run out of money. Our year-to-date expenditures total just over $2.5 million. On the second page shows the revenues. Deposits totaled $497,960, with $482,204 of that of January revenues being statutory revenue. And I checked on the money today for February, and we do have $877,157 that was deposited for February. So that was pretty good. Then page number 3 shows average year, 3-year comparison on our statutory revenues, which consists of the aircraft registration fees, excise tax, and the fuel tax collections. Statutory revenues collected July 1st through January 31st total $3,263,718 compared to $3,950,895 for the same time frame last year. But that doesn't take into consideration that our money goes up and down all the time. So it looks a little low, but that could change next month. You never know. So do you have any questions for me?
Jane, I know it's on here, but where are we right now with respect to aircraft excise tax? And I think you're expecting that we're probably going to exceed the cap this fiscal year.
Probably. As of January 31st, we're at $1,863,557. So, but we only have February,
That's as of
March,
January.
April, May,
So
and
that-
June.
Yeah.
So we're a little over halfway there. So it could go either way, really. I mean, we
And the
could
cap
easily
again?
go
We
with
just had a big month.
For the
It all depends, if someone buys a expensive aircraft and they don't take advantage of one of the 18 exemptions.
I can tell you for the
That
first
can-
7 days, this month, we have like $3,000. So, you know, it can be little or it can be big. It just depends on who's buying aircraft.
Yeah, it's not linear is what you're saying. It's all over the place.
Mhm, yes. Yeah, you can tell by, well, it's not the chart that's up there now, but by the chart that's on the revenue page. Like back in October, look at that one, it was very low.
As I have told you all
33,000.
before, I have written a thank you note to Larry Nichols before, for buying a nice aircraft that I think was about $30 million, and that was about $1 million deposit. Thanking him for making, airport improvements possible across the state and paying to keep our lights and computers on and paying salaries. And that's really, I bring it up again because that kind of underscores the problem with the charter exemption. It's about fairness. So you have a Larry Nichols. You have, in fact, most oil and gas, and I don't want to get into the wind versus not. They don't look for these exemptions. There are other large businesses that you all know that do look for these, and particularly the charter exemption. And yet they'll use that aircraft for a lot of Part 91 operations. That's not right. That's just not right, and we're not asking for anything. In fact, we've been at a place that no other state's been at that allows this exemption. We're not asking for what Kentucky's doing and has been doing in this regard, and we're not asking for what Colorado is proposing, 50%.
Very good. Any other questions for Jane? Okay, Jane, it looks like you're still up for NASAO.
Yes, I have been working with Tracy McDonald, who is the manager of meetings and memberships with NASAO, which is the National Association of State Aviation Officials. And the only thing that has been completed at the moment is that the Skirvin has been chosen to be the host hotel for the conference, which will be held September 23rd through the 26th of this year. Tracy actually came to see Oklahoma City the first week of February. She was here for a while to do a site visit. And I took her around to all these different places to check them out to see what kind of deals she could get on the different venues that are needed to perform whatever activities, events, whatever needs to be done outside the hotel. So we spent 2 or 3 days looking at those. Kat took her to one for me one day that I couldn't go. And she also requested to meet with some of the different organizations that we work with. And so Grayson took her to meet some of those. And so at this point, the only thing that's actually decided is the hotel, which will be the conference hotel. There is a conference call next week to start on the agenda. I think they kind of have some of it put together, but we're going to actually have a call with several to start really working on the agenda. The prospectus is actually complete and ready to be passed out. It's being passed out now to secure sponsors to cover the different events that'll take place at the conference. And the last report that I have from Tracy is that we have 5 silver sponsors and a general session sponsor.
What's the level of the silver sponsor?
It is,
This will be our first time to host the NASEO annual meeting since 1997. It was hosted in Tulsa that year. So, kind of a special deal for us.
Yeah.
Doesn't come that often. So my colleagues, probably from at least usually 40 of the states, will attend, a lot of exhibitors, a lot of other attendees. We can expect probably in excess of just over 300 people at this conference. So it's a good conference for Oklahoma City. I appreciate Secretary Patterson saying that he's giving me the keys to all his vans. But we will be counting
and maybe
ODOT
providing
to support
drivers.
us. And we'll be hoping the Oklahoma City Airport Authority, which we expect the Oklahoma City Airport Authority, we know that it will, right, Christie? Will be helping us as well. So we know we'll get, it's an honor. It's to have our annual meeting here and get the recognition.
The silver sponsors are $4,000, and there's a package involved in what you receive as being a sponsor for that kind of money. There's different levels, there's different events that you can sponsor, like breakfasts, or they have like just hospitality booths and stuff that you can sponsor different things. So there's all levels for everybody. So if you know anybody that would like to participate,
I will be reaching out and touching some companies and very soon. And there's some that have already stepped up that want to, that very much want to. And I mean, American has indicated to me. I think Boeing will probably be. So I think we will get some companies and businesses here that usually we don't see, but because it's in Oklahoma, they will want to support the annual meeting.
so if you know anybody, please have them contact me, and I can get them through the process with Tracy to be a sponsor or to have a booth. We have 33 booths, and 11 of them so far are filled with vendors. So we still have a few to go. There is an early bird deadline of March 23rd when you get the best deal. So you might tell them that to kind of prod them along a little bit if you know of somebody.
We have the governor signed up. She'll be giving the opening keynote on Monday, is that the 24th? Right around 24th? Okay. So that's nice to, I think she was happy to do it though. Don't have to run for election this year, so. The sales, she loves aviation, so she'll be there to do our opening keynote.
So if you have any questions, or if you need to contact me about any of it, please do, and I'll help any way I can.
Great. Thank you very much. Grayson, looks like Federal Aviation Administration Regional Airport Conference you're going to tell us about.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning again.
The FAA Regional Administrators Airport Conference, this is the first time we've had it since, I believe, 2012 or 11. We used to have a conference every year. All the airports within our region, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, would get together, discuss the aviation issues with FAA and state aviation and local airports, and figure out a way to move forward. Unfortunately, there was another federal agency, I don't remember, Vic, you remember which one it was that kind of ruined it for everybody on the conference? Was there air traffic control? So somebody had a conference in Vegas, and there was some very bad national publicity about that, and this was the time when we were having all the budget shortfalls and budget cuts, and so whether it was a good conference or a bad conference, all conferences across the federal scheme got cut. And so it was unfortunate because there was a hole. There was a lot of unknowns, a lot of poor communication that took place, and it just went to show you that the FAA Airports Conference was a good conference. And there were some new airport managers that really kind of felt like they were losing something, like they didn't have the full information or the full picture. So last year, FAA implemented it kind of in a mini conference format. We had a one-day conference at the FAA's location in Fort Worth. And then this year, they finally got permission to do a full-blown day and a half, 2-day conference, and it was really good. We had Winsome Lumford, who's our career FAA person, the Associate Administrator for Airports. She's wearing 2 hats right now. She's both the political appointee temporarily, and then the career administrator portion for the airport side. We also had our new regional administrator, Terry Biggio, who was in attendance. Both good folks, had lots of good things to say about FAA. We're all in a holding pattern, waiting on what Director Byrd was mentioning earlier, and that is the FAA reauthorization. Right now, we have a 6-month authorization appropriation, and once that hopefully gets extended, once those checkbooks get loaded up, we can start making some grant monies to some airports from the federal level. But right now, everybody's just kind of sitting and waiting to go to bid or finishing up design in their projects for the fiscal year 18. So, great conference, good attendance, lots of good speakers, lots of good learning sessions. But with that being said, I'll stand for questions on that item.
Something I failed to mention, but since Grayson just piqued both the current FAA authorization and their spending authority runs out at the end of this month. So we need them to get that's what they'll be doing next, is an extension of both those. We need that to happen. And it'd be nice to do it all the way through August. I'll be able to get some grants out and so forth.
Questions on this topic for Grayson? Okay, Grayson, next item is OAOA.
Item 13, the Oklahoma Airport Operators Quarterly Meeting. We had our quarterly meeting, as we have 3 times a year, plus we have our annual meeting, which is coming up next in April. That's one of the quarters that we consider. Didn't have a designated speaker, so I kind of stepped in and kind of gave the lay of the land in terms of the legislative agenda. We talked about some of the efforts that Director Byrd mentioned, and how airports could support us in educating legislators on the importance of OAC and the importance of some of the other bills that were going through the state legislature, and we do appreciate OAOA's support on all the things that they do for us, because they are our best partner, our best ally when it comes to making sure aviation and airport issues are heard at the state capitol and elsewhere across Oklahoma. So with that being said, it was a good meeting, always is, well attended by probably 30 to 45 different airports, about a dozen consultants and other officials that were there. So with that being said, I'll stand for questions on that item.
Questions on this topic for Grayson? Okay, hearing none, we'll press on to item 14.
This is our 3-year capital improvement program, and hopefully this is the last time we'll call it the capital improvement program based on a future agenda item that I think you all are aware of. But there's a packet in the left-hand folder of your packet there if you want to not look at your screen, the paper copy. This is, we're going to go through all the new projects or the change projects that have been proposed for the Commission's 2020-2021 years of the CIP. We're just going to go down the list, and if you have questions, I'm going to go a little explanation on all of them. Just the overall goal of what we're doing today, I think you all know, is we are requesting permission to move into the public comment phase of our CIP. So if we get permission, we'll go forth, put this out on the street for public comment. Usually about 45 days, we'll entertain those comments, entertain changes, any suggestions by staff, any new information that might have come in between now and the May meeting, which is where you'll consider approving the formal 3-year CIP, the 19 to 21 CIP. So with that being said, let's get started and go through these. The first one, and actually these are the first 2, Ardmore Downtown Executive. These projects were already in the CIP, but due to FAA's discretionary rules and the way FAA can fund projects with discretionary, we had to split up and kind of divide and conquer on these particular projects. So the first project you'll see for just over $1 million, $450 from state apportionment, $450 of non-primary entitlement funds, and then the Commission's making half the local match. This is going to be to bring up the runway lights and PAPIs to LED status as well as going out and doing a crack seal, seal coat while the runway's closed because of efficiencies achieved. We don't want to close the runway down more than we need to. The following year, directly after that, the next project is going to be the discretionary project. This is going to be the major rehabilitation of the parallel taxiway system. We have a preliminary engineering report that's in its final stages that will eventually determine the overall scope and cost of the project. The interesting thing here is that the commission is putting in an extra $500,000 to fund the taxiway lights and guidance signs. That's one of the little caveats with the FAA discretionary rules is that the taxiway lights and signs did not compete well enough with the taxiway pavement reconstruction rehabilitation. So state had to kick in a little extra money to be able to make that taxiway lights and signs an added item. And again, we want to go ahead and do that because the taxiway is already going to be closed. We don't want to go back and reclose the taxiway 2 or 3 years from now.
Grayson, quick comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this will be the time, Grayson is going through this with our proposed CIP with you now, and for the benefit of the public, and of course, everything's online, but at the May meeting, he won't go back through this like this. It'll be more focusing on any comments we've received, additional information that
Changes.
we may want to suggest or recommend a change. It will be focused on that. So if you have any questions, this initial presentation on these, now's the time to please ask them.
So the total project cost here is about $2.8 million, mostly funded with FAA discretionary money, about $1.7 million. State apportionment, I think we've talked about it before, but there's a rule out there that between the state apportionment and the non-primary entitlement funds the airport gets, for every discretionary dollar, we have to give 20% in non-primary entitlement or state apportionment. So it's kind of it's within the program, it's a match within a match, kind of one of those intricacies of how we fund various airport construction projects across the state. Moving on to the next project, little joke here, I did get a little consternation from some of the engineering folks that, you're gonna make me drive all the way to Boise City for this project? No, kidding. But we are doing a major rehab at the Boise City Municipal Airport. This is kind of a vertical phase 2 runway rehabilitation. I believe back in 2010 or 9, it received an asphalt overlay, but it was only 2 inches thick, with the understanding that we'd come back eventually with a second phase. So instead of doing one phase laterally, which is what you'll see sometimes on runway projects, we're doing this vertically. And so we'll add another 2 inches of asphalt. And again, while the runway is closed, we're going to try and get out there and do some runway lights and pappies while the contractors are on site. Total project cost is just over $1.5 million. State apportionment is going to be about $450,000, about $600,000 in non-primary entitlement funds. OAC is helping the sponsor with their local match, but we're also coming in there and helping them fund those runway lights while the runway is closed for the asphalt overlay project. Next project on the list is a project at El Reno Regional Airport. This is for a new terminal building. I don't know if any of you have been out to El Reno Regional, or maybe you've seen it on the news. They've been hit by a tornado twice. I think they might be the only airport in the state of Oklahoma that has that distinction. But the airport has 4 old World War II round-top hangars that are in various states of disrepair and falling apart and are rather porous. Those hangars, the far north round-top hangar actually houses the existing terminal building. It's just a kind of a corner that's been renovated, and it's not very good. It is not what we would consider the best front door to the community for the city of El Reno. And given how the metro area is expanding, given the business jet traffic that El Reno is receiving and continuing to increase as we have seen over the last couple of years, this airport needs a new front door. It needs a new face. And so that's what this project is for, is to move forward and do a new terminal building, separate and independent from the round-top hangar. And the round-top hangar will eventually go away, and the city will go in and fund a large general use hangar which will be adjacent to that terminal building. You can kind of see here on the picture that you have the terminal building, and then just south of it you'll have a couple of new large general use hangars. This is going to really open up and send the El Reno Airport into the future, and hopefully allow it to become the true economic development tool that it can be for the town of El Reno, but for West Oklahoma City too. Obviously, commission share, $500,000, that's our max amount. Sponsor share will be $500,000 or potentially more if they want to do a larger terminal building. They're certainly welcome to do a larger project, but we're capped at $500,000 on this terminal project.
Does not contribute on building construction of this nature?
So FAA has a rule that you have to have your airside needs met for the following 5 years to be able to do what we call revenue-producing projects. That includes terminal building, which, yes, I get that terminal building's not revenue-raising when it comes to GA, but they're all lumped together. Also includes fuel farms and it includes hangars. And so it's really difficult for our Oklahoma airports to be able to say, hey, my airside needs have been met, and therefore they can use their entitlement monies on a project like that. Smaller airports certainly get to that point. Like, for example, Purcell, south of Oklahoma City, they were able to claim that their airside needs were met, and therefore they received a fuel farm utilizing their entitlement monies. But the reason for that, if you look at the amount of infrastructure that Purcell has versus the amount of infrastructure that an El Reno or a Muskogee or a Bartlesville or a Guthrie Edmond might have, they're just never going to get there, at least probably not going to get there, to where they can say, hey, we've checked the box, we've met our airside needs with our entitlement monies, and therefore we can move forward with a revenue-producing project. We'll see them scattered throughout the state, certainly, but for right now, an airport like El Reno has other airside needs that they're going to need to fund with their NPE monies and with their federal monies moving forward. So. Next project on the list is another Panhandle project at the Guyman Municipal Airport. This project's going to be just over about $4 million. This is going to be a major rehab to the runway and parallel taxiway systems. More than likely just a maintenance overlay, 2-inch maintenance overlay for all the runway and taxiway surfaces, but obviously a preliminary engineering report, which will be done 3 or 4 years in advance of the construction of the project, will determine the final scope, final cost of what that project's going to be. We expect a little over $3 million in discretionary monies, just shy of $500,000 in state apportionment. Obviously, the airport's non-primary entitlement funds will be used as part of that project, and this OAC will be making half the local match, about $210,000 for that particular project. I will say that the Guyman Airport should be coming before you in the May meeting for a grant request for the runway lights, and yes, they are building the runway lights high enough so that they can accommodate that future overlay and won't have to go back in and readjust the lights. So they're pre-planning for this particular project. Next project on the list is at Kingfisher Municipal. I think some of you all might remember this is a state-only airport. It is not in NIPIUS. It's not eligible for federal dollars, so it relies solely upon OAC for its infrastructure funding. That being said, I'm going out to the airport next week to discuss with them what steps they need to take to get into the NIPIUS. Before my time, I think in Director Byrd and Dale's time, they tried to get a couple airports into the system, Chattanooga and Anadarko, and we were told by FAA, we've got too many airports in the NIPIUS. Yes, they meet it by the based aircraft, but they're too close to an existing NIPIUS airport. Kingfisher does have the requisite based aircraft, and it is actually far enough away from the next nearest NIPIUS airport. It's kind of in a hole in terms of where our NIPIUS airport's far enough away from Wiley, far enough away from Guthrie Edmond, far enough away from El Reno, and far enough away from Fairview that if there's an airport in the state that has a shot of getting into the NIPIUS, Kingfisher might be it. And so we're going to be working over the next several years to try and get them into the NIPIUS and justify their inclusion in that, and hopefully be able to not rely entirely solely upon OAC and state government for their infrastructure funding. They were not.
No. A great success story here behind this airport. Up until 5 years ago, we were talking a grass strip with strong encouragement from our favorite senior senator, a fellow named Jim Inhofe. But with appropriate, we entered into an arrangement with Kingfisher where we put up $400,000 and they exceeded that, I don't know by how much, but
they put in about 600, maybe more,
to pave the runway. And now you can see that they're at 13 based aircraft, and I think with some
they're expecting to receive more, have had strong support from their legislative delegation out there. Senator Yak, who's chairman of Senate Transportation, Representative Sanders, who's in House leadership, have been very supportive, and so it's been a success story, Kingfisher Airport.
And I think they've, we recently completed a taxi lane expansion project out there, and I think they still have 5 slots left available for hangars, so obviously their amount of base aircraft will only continue to go up. And they are definitely feeling some of that urban sprawl from the metro area. They're certainly getting some people interested in Northwest Oklahoma City that want to come to the Kingfisher Airport. But the project before you today in the proposed CIP is to reconstruct and rehabilitate the taxi lanes and apron area. It's pretty old pavement. It's pretty deteriorated. It has some significant raveling. Project cost is about $400,000 split between OAC and the sponsor, about $380,000 from OAC and about $20,000 from the sponsor. Next on the list is a Mid-America Industrial Airport project that's in Pryor, Oklahoma. This one actually had been on the CIP. It's been pushed back a year due to FAA's request that they didn't have the discretionary in the 2020 timeframe, that it had to be pushed to 2021. And we've also visited with them. This is very similar to the Ardmore downtown taxiway problem, is that those taxiway lights are not competing for that discretionary amount. So therefore, the OAC is going to be stepping in and funding the existing taxiway light upgrade to the LED system. With that being said, total project cost is just over $2 million. Discretionary amounts just over $1.1 million, with about $75,000 in state apportionment. OAC is making half the local match, but in addition to that, we'll be putting in another $500,000 to get that existing lighting system and guidance sign system upgraded to the LED status.
Please, this is apparently classified information, but do keep in mind the announcement was recently made about the industrial park there. It's where Google has a location. They're adding 600 jobs there. Whether Google uses Mid-America Industrial, that seems to be classified. I got this feeling Google has an aircraft. We do know there is some traffic that is definitely generated because of Google's presence at the Claremore Airport. Expect that this airport will continue to be more because of the tenants who are in the industrial park there.
I do know that their next desire at Mid-America is to extend the runway to accommodate some of those larger jets that want to come in there and utilize the industrial park. And I know they're going to be knocking on our door for some of that help probably in the next couple of years.
I don't think any are based there, if I'm right.
None of them are based.
but-
It's definitely a very large itinerant airport, transient.
Probably meet the requisite operations standard now. I wouldn't be surprised of the critical aircraft we're talking about.
Should be close, I would imagine. Next project on the list is Ponca City Regional Airport. This is also one that has been pushed back due to needing a few extra dollars. This is kind of a, I won't say success story because it hasn't been granted yet, but could be a success story in our preliminary engineering report program, that our preliminary engineering report indicated that, okay, additional funds were going to be needed for the reconstruction of this runway. And as such, it was originally programmed for about $4.5–5 million. And today, as you can see, is now proposed at about a little over $7.5 million. Most of that coming from FAA discretionary dollars, a little over $5.5 million, with state apportionment coming in just over $800,000. OAC is making half the local match, $375,000. I will tell you, I applaud the airport for understanding that they're going to basically be getting a brand new runway. They have some longitudinal grade challenges, so if you go down the runway, they definitely have some humps and bumps in the existing, so they can't just put it back as it was to meet FAA longitudinal grade standards. And because of that, they're going to have to narrow their runway from 150 to 100 feet. And so we applaud the airport in understanding that, and certainly applaud the local officials there in understanding that, look, yes, we are trading off the 150 for the 100, but we are getting basically a brand new runway, which is going to solidify the Ponca City Regional Airport for probably the next 40 years to come. So with that being said, I do want to thank, I don't know if the airport's in the room, no, but I do want to thank the airport for understanding that situation.
These are some of the, some of you in this room will recall, Ponca City used to have commercial service because the Essential Air Service subsidy provided from the FAA, well, actually, I think from US DOT, the circle was smaller, so Ponca City was eligible, as was Enid. That went away, probably around 2005, 2006, and commercial service there went away. But there are definitely, there's no question, some patrons of the airport and folks in the city that have that dream, just like they do in Enid. That's been, that they have commercial service. That's probably not going to happen anywhere in the near future because of the success of Stillwater, frankly. And it's certainly serving the area now. And another development in our system, Stillwater will be reclassified, correct me if I'm wrong, Grayson, this year to primary commercial airport because of the number of enplanements at, as Gary Johnson likes to call it now, Stillwater International. And they offer free parking.
Free parking.
Okay, I'm sorry, Christie, don't tell Mark that I said that.
It's not official yet. We're also waiting for those checkbooks to be loaded, but we do expect when those checkbooks get loaded from the FAA that Stillwater's going to have $1 million of primary entitlement monies in its account instead of the $150,000 of non-primary entitlement money. So fingers crossed there. We wish Gary Johnson the best of luck. We'll certainly be in touch with him, but he's moving on to graduate status instead of undergrad status.
Our federal funding will come directly to them and not through OAC's channeling any longer.
Next project on the list is a project at the R.L. Jones Junior Airport in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have, I'm sure most of you have seen, or some of you have seen, the many projects we've been doing out there over the last decade and a half. We are just now finishing up the primary rehab to their primary runway. 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, we finished up the rehab to the parallel taxiway to the primary runway. In a couple of years, we're going to be doing a rehab to their secondary parallel runway. This particular project will be to rehab the connector taxiways between the primary runway and the primary parallel taxiway. They have some non-standard situations going on, whether the taxiway is too wide, it has too large of a holding area. They have non-standard high-speed taxiway exits. And so this project will be to not only rehab, but reconstruct those to meet FAA standards. We believe that at this time, instead of just going in and doing a 2-inch maintenance overlay, that because they are of the non-standard situation and to help improve safety at the airport so that we don't have any kind of runway incursions or runway mitigation issues, that those will be reconstructed in their proper formats. Again, a preliminary engineering report will dictate what that format will look like and what the final cost and project scope will be. Total project cost right now, just a shade over $3.1 million. Most of that coming from FAA discretionary at about $2.25 million. State apportionment at $300,000, and OAC is making half the local share at $150,000. Next project on the list is at Sallisaw Municipal Airport. This is one of those good stories that we're going to combine some OAC dollars with some FAA non-primary entitlement dollars and try to do a big project in one phase instead of having to let the airport phase it over multiple years with their own non-primary entitlement funds. This is going to be to rehab the LED runway, or put in LED runway lights, rehab the existing lighting system, put in a lighted windsock and an electrical vault, and will hopefully make the airport 24/7, 365, daytime and nighttime capable. Total project cost, just over $900,000. Going to be about $450,000 of non-primary entitlements, with OAC putting in $400,000 of state matching state funds to this particular project to help out and get everything done in one particular phase. These next couple of projects you're going to see at Seminole. We've actually got 3 projects listed for Seminole. Seminole has a non-standard parallel taxiway to its runway. It does not meet the B2 category standards, which is what all of our regional, the minimum requirement for all our regional business airports is that B2 standard. The north portion, so from the apron north, it's in pretty good shape. It doesn't need full reconstruction at this point, but the piece to the south, and you see that building down there on the picture, That's Envirotech. I don't know if any of you know Envirotech. They're very much involved in the AC making systems for aircraft, and they do some installations actually at the airport. Most of it's shipped off to third-party service providers, but that whole area and that hangar area down there is in the way. Not the Envirotech building, but the hangar area is that parallel taxiway is non-standard. And actually, if a jet comes into this airport, they can't use that taxiway because of how narrow it is and because of how close the hangars are to that piece of taxiway. So they actually have to do a little back taxi on the runway. Obviously, that's a safety concern. So the larger project is slated for a little ways on down the road, probably 23, 24 timeframe. Before we can get to that, we're going to need to relocate those hangars. We're going to have to move them to another part of the airport. And they've actually, about midfield of the airport, they have started a stub taxiway to go back into that new hangar development area. So with all that being said, that's what these three projects are going to be doing. The first project is somewhat different from that. That's particularly runway lights, LED runway lights, but the airport was going to utilize their NPE monies. This is kind of where we have to get interesting with our different funds, different sources of monies. The question you asked, Commissioner Putnam, about using your NPE monies on vertical construction. This is going to be one of those circumstances where we've asked, I won't call it a waiver, but we've asked for FAA's forgiveness to utilize NPE monies on some vertical construction. And so since only NPE monies can be utilized for that, we want them to save their NPE monies to be able to relocate those hangars. One of those hangars has to be relocated by the tenant itself because it's a privately owned hangar. The other hangars are city-owned. So the city is going to spend their NPE money on relocating those hangars along with some of their own money, significant chunk of city money. But what we're going to do is we're going to step up, we're going to fund, or at least that's what we're proposing to do. We're going to propose to fund the runway lights, and then we're going to start in phases funding the taxi lane system that will get back to that hangar area. And so that's what these three projects you're going to see over the course of these couple of years. The first project is the one before you right now on your piece of paper, and the one on the slide on the left is for the runway lights, about $500,000 total project cost, about $475,000 from OAC and $25,000 matching share from the local sponsor. If you flip the page, you'll now go to phase one of what we're calling the parallel taxiway realignment project. This is really going to be phase one of about 5 or 6 phases that we're going to have to do this project over the course of. And this will be the first phase, or the first stub out of building that hangar area. It's going to be $450,000 of state apportionment money, and OAC is going to help the sponsor with half its local matching share at $25,000. Total project cost is going to be about $500,000. This is going to be in 2020. And then you turn the page once more, and this is going to be phase two of the parallel taxiway realignment project, which will help get even further for another stub out for that hangar area. Again, same principles in 2021, $450,000 of state apportionment money with $25,000 of local match, helping the airport with its local matching share. And we're just going to keep continuing to do this in 22, and then 23, and then probably into 24, as finally we're able to get the entire parallel taxiway system to a point where it meets standards and it can accept 100% of the time business jet and King Air type traffic.
Something we're doing, if you all notice at the top, is in every instance, we're trying to list the major business users at that airport. And as Grayson's mentioned, Envirosystems is it's one of those stories you might see on Oklahoma Horizon sometime, the Career Tech program about business and industry and education across the state. But Envirosystem actually does the climate control systems, has some major contracts with Embraer, the Phenom. They're doing that system. Some of you knew Craig Froelich, who owned it up until about 3 or 4 years ago, and he sold it. But they actually were involved in the Boeing NASA roadshow that I mentioned to you earlier in my report. But a really great Oklahoma company, and I think now is up around between 150 and 200 employees, right there at the Seminole Municipal Airport.
And they're wanting to expand, I might add. They're wanting to build a large hangar where they can do more of their installation servicing actually at the airport, as opposed to having to ship most of their products to third-party providers. So definitely a good story there in Seminole, America. Next project on the list is a rehabilitation project. This is just gonna be a basic crack seal and seal coat for both the runway and the parallel taxiway system. It's gonna be a 2020-2021 project. Gonna spend about $300,000 of non-primary entitlement funds. Commission's gonna put up about $450,000 of state funds, and then the sponsor's gonna be making the match to those particular projects to hopefully get not only just the runway, but the taxiway done as well while the contractor's on site. We can get some good bid prices. Next project on the list is at Skytook Municipal Airport. This runway is in fairly bad shape. I don't know if anybody's flown into the runway, but it's been repaired, patched, crack sealed, overlaid for probably the last 20, 30, 40 years, and it's finally at the end of its life cycle. We believe we're starting to see some base failures, and we believe a reconstruction is going to be due. That being said, it will be the preliminary engineering report, as with those other projects we were talking about, that will dictate whether or not we're going to reconstruct this particular runway. But right now, as it stands, total project cost a little over $2.1 million. Most of that coming from FAA discretionary dollars at $1.5 million, and OAC making half the local match at $100,000. This project will be in 2021. Next project on the list is at Tahlequah Municipal Airport. Again, this is another one of those projects where we're trying to combine state dollars with an airport's NPE dollars to do a project in only one phase. This is going to be the installation of taxiway lights and rehabilitations of the existing guidance signs. The guidance signs are not at their proper locations with the hold short bars for aircraft wanting to enter or exit the runway. So we want to bring those up to standards to not confuse pilots and make sure that the runway is completely safe and the object-free area is controlled from any kind of aircraft that might want to come into there. So that being said, this is going to be a 2020-2021 project. Next project is at Watonga Municipal Airport. This is going to be very, very similar to what we're proposing at Skytook. Again, it's been overlaid, crack seal, seal coated, rehabbed, and I think at this point in time, we're finally just needing to reconstruct the runway. Again, preliminary engineering report will dictate what the scope and price of that project will be estimated at, but total project cost about a little over $2.1 million. FAA discretionary at 1.5, state apportionment at $150,000, and the commission will be making half the local matching share at $100,000. This is a 2021 project. Next project on the list is at Waynoka Municipal Airport. We'll say this is a NIPIUS airport, but is unclassified. It only has 6 or 7 based aircraft. I know they are trying to get more as we speak, but given that this is unclassified, it does need some just basic maintenance on its pavement surfaces to preserve the life of the pavement. So since it's unclassified, that means it's not getting any more NPE or non-primary entitlement funds from the FAA, so it's relying upon the state for its infrastructure dollars, just like a Kingfisher would be right now, although Kingfisher never had a chance to tap into that FAA dollar stream. So Waynoka, this is just a basic pavement maintenance project. It's got an interesting pavement section. It's actually bordered by concrete, and in the middle it's asphalt. So the outside 10 feet on either side and the outside probably 40 feet on the ends are all concrete, with asphalt being entirely in the middle. So it'll be a combination crack seal, seal coat, and a joint seal spall repair type project. Total project cost about $300,000, funded with about $285,000 of commission funds from the state, with the local matching share at $15,000. This will be a 2021 project. Next project on the list is at Wiley Post Airport here in Oklahoma City. This will be phase 1 of 2. We're going to go out and rehabilitate the crosswind runway. First phase will be rehabilitating the pavement on the crosswind runway to the tune of about $1 million. It's going to be a state apportionment and non-primary entitlement project. About $750,000 of state apportionment, obviously $150,000 in non-primary entitlement from the airport. Commission will be making half the local match at about $50,000. It'll be a 2021 project. Phase 2 will obviously be the electrical project. This is one of those that we just ran out of money. We can't do electrical and pavement together. We hope to, on a lot of occasions, able to do that, but this is just one of those cases we can't. And since it's a crosswind, it doesn't have the priority system to be able to compete for FAA discretionary dollars. And so that's why we're having to actually phase this into 2 phases, even though we may not really enjoy doing that. So that's it for the airport-specific projects. Now we're getting into the state system planning projects. We've got two pages. The first one is our preliminary engineering report. Again, this is the preliminary engineering reports that we're doing for all our discretionary, our big rock projects to help get us a good scope and cost estimate well in advance of the FAA's funding cycle, so that we don't run into any issues where, hey, a project needs an extra $4 million and we're already in grant season and we're not getting another $4 million. So hopefully we can find those hiccups early on in the cycle where either one, we can delay the project and not have an impact on the funding, or two, we can find the extra funding and plan for that in the future. State apportionment's about $400,000, and OAC will be making the match to that at $44,000. Next is our actual system planning activities. This is for the update of the Oklahoma Airport System Plan. I think we've talked about this before. It's been in the CIP. We're pushing it back a year from 2019 to 2020, based on what FAA is telling us, unless we meet with FAA at the end of April and they tell us, well, no, we can go ahead and keep that in 2019. But right now, it looks like we're shooting for 2020 as a particular year to do the full update of the Oklahoma Airport System Plan. That was originally devised back in 1999. That is the guiding document that guides all of our infrastructure investments from the federal, state, and local level. That's the classification system, regional business, district, community, et cetera, and all the amenities that are expected at those particular type of airports. About $350,000 of state apportionment, with OAC coming in with another $100,000 for matching, but also to address some of those non-NIPIAS airports that are in the state system plan. That's gonna be for 2020. And then in 2021, this will just be our typical system planning grant where we're taking money to pay for activities that we do for FAA, whether that's pavement management, whether that's system planning, revising the system, like for example, revising some of the data that we have within the system plan, or for capturing some of those capital planning processes for the FAA when they want us to do some of that work for them, like the NIPIAS needs update, which is the 20-year long-range plan. So that's gonna be about $100,000 of state apportionment, and obviously we're gonna be matching that with our in-kind work for that particular project. That being said, that's the end of the slides. Commissioners, in the back of the last two pages, you'll see the breakout for the 2020 and the 2021 all together, if you're curious about that. With that being said, I will stand for any questions that you may have. Thank you for allowing me to take you through that long, laborious process, but staff would recommend moving into the public comment phase for the CIP.
Questions for Grayson? Very
If you
good
have any-
briefing.
If you have any questions about airports that are not in, and I just reiterate what I said earlier, we used to have a committee process we took advantage of until probably about 7 years ago. There was a CIP committee, if you will. Some commissioners would be frustrated because you would spend time there, and then that committee would make a recommendation to the full commission, but really we would have to go back through it because of Open Meeting Act requirements, so that the public could hear while we were making the decisions, the recommendations we were making. Because not all the public attended the committee meeting, which was open, but we discontinued the committee. So this is really kind of that's why this is longer. That's why I encourage you to ask questions. If you see an airport, well, why aren't they in it? Please ask. We can tell you. It all has to do with, as Grayson and Dale went over last time, but Grayson's part, developing those needs. What are the 20-year needs? What's that airport's 5-year airport capital improvement program for each airport? It's a pretty exacting planning, programming process. But
I was just gonna ask you if you're gonna bring the whole staff up to Boise City.
We might, just for the kickoff meeting, we might make them do that.
if you'll meet us there with pizza.
Yeah, say, you have, maybe if you'll come pick us up in the airplane, we can do that.
I would move for approval.
We have a motion
Second?
and a second. Please call the vote.
Vice Chair Conway?
Aye.
Chair Com.
I mean Chair. Something's wrong. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Commissioner Potter?
Aye,
I'll get these straightened out.
you're fine.
Commissioner Putnam?
Aye.
Commissioner Amos?
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter?
Aye.
Commissioner Ray?
Aye.
And Commissioner Ritz? Aye. Yes.
Very good. Motion passes. Thank you very much, Grayson. Good briefing. Dale, Capital Improvement Grant Program now.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. You may recall in the draft agenda you received, there was 3 items for today's meeting. The Bristow new construction for the runway is going to wait until May to bid, before it gets granted. The sponsor is still reviewing the bids and the bidder, so it's going to be in May. Also, the Enid project has been moved back to May. They received high bids, only had 3 bidders, and so they're going to repackage their bid proposal and go back out for bids again. We've also sent them about 15 bidders that have bid on previous terminal buildings, and hopefully they'll get more bidders. The one item that did survive is for a grant amendment to the Elk City project. That overall project out there consists of reconstructing a portion of the center portion of the parallel taxiway, moving it over and widening it, and putting in new lights. What this amendment will do is take the federal funds that they're putting into the lighting system and adding these funds to it and changing it from an incandescent system to an LED system, which the airport owner wishes to do that for operating costs and maintenance fees. So they're requesting a grant of, a total cost of $7,680 to upgrade the system. It's going to be a 50-50 proposition between the sponsor and the state. Total cost of $7,680 to do the upgrade. The state shares $3,840, and the sponsors are going to put up $3,840. Yes, and staff recommends approval.
Questions for Dale? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Please call the vote.
While we have a pause here, just for the purpose of our recording and our video and so forth, obviously Commissioner Putnam is not Commissioner Lindy Ritz. Commissioner Lindy Ritz is sitting to your far left audience and those who may be watching or later watch and those in the public today. And Commissioner Putnam is sitting behind the sign that says Commissioner Lindy Ritz. So just a little footnote to correct the record.
I appreciate the musical chairs this time.
We'll try to discontinue the music in May.
Yeah. Ready for the vote?
Vice Chair Potter,
Aye.
Commissioner Amos,
Aye.
Commissioner Putnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Commissioner Ray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dale. Grayson, you're back with the Oklahoma Airport System.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Before you is a recommendation, or excuse me, a request by the town of Laverne to remove the airport from the Oklahoma Airport System Plan. We talked about this at the last meeting, actually, excuse me, 2 meetings ago in December. We wanted to get your approval to move out to do a public hearing, public comment phase. We did. We posted it in a couple of newspapers, the Woodward paper, as well as I think the Laverne Constitution. We heard no comments, adverse or support for the removal of the airport. The city still indicates that they would like to remove the airport from the system. In your packet, you'll see the original letter requesting as such, signed by the mayor. Just to give you a little background history on this, this is the project, this is the airport that was on leased property. The lease had ran out. There was an appraisal done. The airport could not afford what the judge and the appraiser had said the value of the property was. And so therefore, at the end of the day, the airport decided, well, we only have a couple of based aircraft. It's not worth it as a town of our size to pay for the land, and the landowner did not want to extend the lease. So as such, the judge put in place a motion that, you will pay a fee to the landowner. The city will pay a fee to the landowner on a daily basis for however long the airport's in the system, and it's considered a public use airport. So the airport's moving from public use to private use, and one of those steps in the process is removing it from our system. Airport will still be there, still be a private use airport. FAA still has to go through its process, but this is the step we're having before you today, and we request that we recommend the removal of the Laverne Municipal Airport from the Oklahoma Airport System Plan. What this basically means is it's no longer going to be eligible for any state funding. It hasn't received a state grant, I think, since '95, so it's not obligated from the state. But they haven't received any money from OAC or the state in a very, very long time. With that being said, I will stand for any questions or comments.
We, just to put emphasis on the fact that this has been requested by the sponsor. We did, the owner of the airport, we did have a concern expressed to us by AOPA. We talked to them about that and made them aware of the fact that this has been requested by the sponsor. Certainly, financial circumstances come into, are very large here. And I think after, that we didn't get any other comment or remark, I think the recommendation is appropriate, and we didn't even hear from their former, I believe, their own Jane Giroux on this. And I believe this is, so she didn't have anything to say about the Laverne Airport either. So I think we should honor the request of the city leaders and the mayor and move forward.
Understand. Right. Staff recommended approval.
Yeah, staff recommends the removal of the airport from the state airport system.
And Commissioner Ray made a motion to approve. Second? Okay, Jerry, I think, seconded. Okay. Call the vote, please.
Vice Chair Potter,
Aye.
Commissioner Amos,
Aye.
Commissioner Putnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Commissioner Ray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz,
Aye.
Chairman Conway.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Grayson, EAA Adventure.
This is the standard EA Oshkosh AirVenture trip that we make with several Oklahoma partners. This year we've lined up Commerce, as always, Enid, which is kind of our the organizing entity, Ada, Ardmore, and then we're looking for a few others. I know Guyman, Ponca City, Altus, Bartlesville, McAllister, Muskogee are all on the list of potential communities that would like to join our partnership. We should be hearing today, I believe, later this afternoon, whether or not we are getting a grant or a donation or however you want to call it from the Business Roundtable to support setting up these economic development meetings with companies there at Oshkosh. So we would hire out basically a professional economic development organization that will set up meetings with companies that are exhibiting at Oshkosh, that are up at Oshkosh, that either, one, have an interest in moving their business, expanding their business, or entering into a new business, and are essentially looking for a state like Oklahoma that might have some of our requirements. Last year was the first year we did it. We got a lot of good reception from about 6 of the 10 meetings we had set up. I don't believe any of those companies have come here, but as you all know, the economic development process is not a overnight process. I don't know how long Vince had been working on Kratos, but I'm sure a very, very long time before that one finally got sealed and signed on the dotted line.
Over a year, probably closer to 2 years.
So it's one of those things that, as the economic developers will tell you, that if you're not doing it, somebody else is, and somebody's probably trying to steal your companies away from your community. So with that being said, it's July 23rd through 29th. Staff's recommending a request of sponsoring and participating in that show up to $4,000 if we have in the past. Typically, the cost is a little less than that. Usually it's about anywhere from $2,700 to $3,500, depending on how many partners we get for that particular show. I'll stand for any questions.
Great. Questions for Grayson? Okay, hearing none, and
I think you mentioned it culminates with the Senator Inhofe luncheon.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay. I know Commissioner Hunter's been at that, and maybe some, but, so that's always a good way to end it, to conclude the air show.
We have a luncheon for all the Oklahoma members and trying to get some of those companies to come to see the senator speak and visit with the senator on a one-on-one basis. But that's at Saturday at about noon over in the Nature Center area, if any of you are attending Oshkosh this year.
staff recommends approval.
Yes, sir.
correct? Do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve the 4,000 for the Oshkosh trip.
Second.
And we have a second. Okay, please call the vote.
Vice Chair Potter,
Aye.
Commissioner Amos,
Aye.
Commissioner Putnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Commissioner Ray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz,
Aye.
and Chairman Conway.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, item 18, Grayson, administrative rules.
All right, administrative rules. I believe it was going back to our December, or maybe even before that, we had requested approval to change some of the administrative rules for one, APA, the Aircraft Pilot and Passenger Protection Act, but also for the OAC grant program. One, the APA rules needed to change to coordinate with the existing changes in law that we had passed last session. This is just a few of the minor tweaks that we had done to APA to ensure businesses were heard and had a more friendly approach and application process. We're always trying to figure out what's the most efficient application process for the entities that are affected that want to build stuff near airports, whether it's tall structures or whether it's a house in a runway protection zone. We want everybody to be able to feel that there's an efficient process out there. So we made a couple of changes. We'd been listening to folks that have gone through the process for 3 or 4 years, and finally came up with a list of about a half dozen changes. A couple of the highlights. One, we're allowing for micrositing. So if somebody applies for a structure, let's say it's a tower, let's say it's a wind turbine, tall structure, they want to put it right here. And then the contractor gets out there and says, well, we can't put it right there. We just need to move it right over here. Well, technically, the way it's supposed to work is under the previous, the way it was read, they'd have to file a new application. That didn't make sense. So we made a change that, yes, you can microsite up to a certain amount of feet. We actually go beyond what the FAA is willing to do in terms of micrositing before they have to reapply. And obviously, that's going to impact your height. It can't go any higher than what it was originally studied at. But a little micrositing movement, 50 foot, 100 foot, 200 foot here and there, that's not going to impact the overall permit application process that we have. So that's one of the biggies. One, we extended a time frame on a permit that had been approved that they have to file in the county courthouse, the county land records. We wanted to make sure that was in there as well. But that's just a couple of the highlights items. You'll see behind tab number 18, and I apologize, these are backwards. The first one you'll see in the tab is actually the OAC, but if you flip to the middle part, you'll see the APA changes there. Most of it's, like I said, all the same stuff that was in the House bill that was passed and signed by the governor last year to make those tweaks to the APA process. We're
simply implementing now, by way of regulation, by way of our rules, to implement the statutory changes. Something that I want to say, because I know Grayson knows this as well, that this is not to suggest we haven't been very, very friendly and reasonable in our administration of our authority here. I've shared this with you all before, but some instances of that. Coke, we could have had a pretty nice fine, $1,000 a day per application they should have filed. We didn't do that. Felt that was very penalizing, really beyond the spirit and intent of the law. That's for their facility that was near Enid Woodring, that is near Enid Woodring Regional Airport. And the second one, and I only bring this up because it's timely, the near 200 applications that have been filed with Aeronautics by the wind energy industry, we have only denied 6% of those applications, and none of those have ever been appealed to you, the full commission, and obviously not to district court. So we have, in fact, we've been asked more than once, is that all you want, is $200? And I think we're going to start inviting those people, well, if you'd like to make an additional contribution, which we can actually take under our law, let us tell you how to do that. But we've been extremely reasonable, and we're just continuing to move that in that manner with the statutory changes that were made last year and now the rule changes to reflect that.
We had a public comment period as required with any administrative rule change. Didn't have any public comments. Nobody attended the hearing. So we are recommending that these be adopted by you all and go through the trek through the legislative process and hopefully get the legislature's approval by the end of the session. So that's the first one. The second one, under B, is also here in your packet. That's the first item behind number 18 in your packet. These are changes to the OAC grant program. One, we're going to rename the capital improvement program. The mention I had earlier when we were going through the CIP, we're changing it to airport construction program to more resonate with the general public. And kind of, we've seen what ODOT's done with their 8-year construction program. Everybody knows what the construction program is, but sometimes when you say capital improvement, why is aviation spending money over at the capital? No, it's the capital with the A, not the O. So we get that from time to time. So hopefully this will resonate more with the general public. We're also moving to a 5-year CIP instead of a 3-year CIP. So as much as I hate to apologize in advance, but next year when we do this presentation, probably gonna be a little longer. We're gonna have a few more years to add on there. So I'll try and speed it up for next year a little bit. But that's it on the name change in the 5-year side. And then we're listing what we would call our list of eligible and justified projects in a generic sense to really narrow down what the OAC program can participate in and allow our airports, not just from our perspective, but allow our airports to understand, okay, what can we participate in, what can we partake in? So you'll see that on page number 3 there, airport construction program projects. The first item is obviously eligible, so that's your first test. Is the project eligible? You know, is it maintenance? Is it rehabilitation? Is it reconstruction? Is it new construction or new installation? You'll see under little I, some of the items not considered: maintenance, applying herbicide, replacing light bulbs, retopping of trees that have already been topped once. And we're taking this, we're not reinventing the wheel here, we're just taking this from the FAA AIP, Airport Improvement Program Handbook. So they have really been the godfather of how to fund airport projects, and we're simply learning or taking on what they have now. I will say their book is about yay thick, about 600 pages, and we're just taking a very generic approach and not doing 600 pages worth of administrative rules. And so that's really what we're talking about here. If you look over to page 4, again, after you have eligible, then you have justified. Is the project justified? Does it set forth some of the goals in the Oklahoma Airport System Plan? Is it moving a particular goal forward, so on and so forth? So that's really what the gist of these rules are. Again, we went over these last time at our last, or 2 commission meetings ago, back in December. And that's what, again, we didn't have any comments. We had a comment period, nobody at the public hearing. We also have, if you look at the page number, I believe it's at the back here, page number 11, a little diagram of what the 5-year construction program looks like. So years 1 through 3, that's what we call the near term, low flexibility. Year 4, we call our transition year, a little bit of flexibility there, but we're trying to firm up that project. And then obviously year 5 is considered our extended program, and it's moderately flexible. So that's just kind of the sequencing that we're looking at so that airports understand that, okay, you get in year 5, that's not a guarantee that it's gonna happen in year 1. There's gonna be some things that have to be flushed out, environmentals, maybe a pop-up project comes in that has to displace that particular project. But at the end of the day, that's really gonna solidify our airport grant program and our planning and programming procedures that Dale and I talked to you about last meeting. So with that being said, I'll stand for questions, but staff recommends approval of these administrative rules to move into the legislative process.
Questions for Grayson? Hearing no questions, I'll
Move
stand
for
for motion. We have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. Call the vote, please.
Vice Chair Potter,
Aye.
Commissioner Amos,
Aye.
Commissioner Putnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Commissioner Ray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz,
Aye.
Chairman Conley.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Tracy. Director Byrd, concluding remarks.
We would not have thought, Commissioners, as to that last item, that we really needed to clarify that, no, a runway that's been closed for a number of years, not being used by the public, that's really not an eligible item. But we actually, there was some discussion of that with someone and said, you know, maybe we need to do this. We thought that would be about as clear as day, but apparently it wasn't. Two comments I'd like to make. We don't do this lightly, but it is something that I will tell you, we have to be responsible. The money we receive under the authority of the state of Oklahoma through the taxing authority and the authority to impose fees. In my time as director, we have now removed 15 airports from our system. When I became director, we had 123 airports in our system. Many of those were either an airport with one based aircraft, and some of those said one base, but we couldn't find the based aircraft. I know that's hard. I know it's very difficult. In fact, at times I would get calls that suggested to me it was almost like consolidating a school district. Not an easy thing. But at that time, we were about number 4 per capita in number of public airports in our system. And we are constantly examined under somewhat of a microscope, particularly this session with a consolidation discussion, are you using your funds wisely? And while it is very hard, I think at times we have to take a step like this, as hard as it may be. We love general aviation, we love pilots, but we also have to stand for the prudent and responsible use of public dollars. And then it also, kind of connected to that same vein, it is something I am very, very proud of. I don't know that any state agency can say this, that 83% of the monies we do get goes to our core mission, airport infrastructure. And that was something that really resonated and always does with legislators, that, well, here's how we spend our money, and our books back that up, of course. That's something all of you can be proud of too. So that's my comments about agenda items, and certainly any of you may have some. Would love to hear those.
Great. Any comments from the commissioners? Thank you very much, Director Byrd. Our next meeting is going to be right here in this room, May 10th at 10 o'clock. Any new business? Anything from the public? Hearing none, I'll call this meeting adjourned.